Why you got Sack and Juvie tatted on you? They not dead. I wouldn't tat nobody on me that's not dead. 2 days after that, these boys dead.
Well, it just, which one were you close with?
Both of them. Every last one of them. I already know. My dead and gone. I already know what y'all here for.
Well, it just, which one were you close with?
Both of them. Every last one of them.
Did you grow up with them?
Every last one of them.
And what he exposed ain't just raising questions. It's shaking the whole internet like an earthquake. This new clip is so wild it might straight up rewrite everything people thought they knew about that night. Let's dive into the chaos, because this bombshell that just dropped is already turning timelines upside down. These leaked interrogation videos coming out in November 2025 show Jacoby Mills, a close associate who was actually there, and they deliver the most detailed insider viewpoint we've ever had on the night Sack Chaser and Juvie got ended. But don't get it twisted.
Within the group about money and control.
Yeah, he pulled that gun on me.
Saying Kobe pulled a gun on her?
Yep, 5:30 that morning. She called out of work and she called. Wait, stop.
And you really
stop.
can't even tell Courtney. I know what.
Yeah, don't say it. Don't say it.
That's what she told Mariah too, because that's what Mariah told me. Jamie just called me at 8 and told me.
Melly called her at like 5:30 that morning.
This ain't some blurry cell phone clip of the actual hit. This is raw interrogation room footage, unfiltered and heavy, and it's got the streets buzzing and the internet losing control. What makes this footage hit even harder is the fact that Mills wasn't some outsider. He was in the red car trailing the Jeep where the homicides allegedly went down. This ain't rumors. This ain't someone said. This is firsthand words from a dude who moved with the team, who knew everybody involved, and who saw how pieces shifted from the inside. But to understand why this footage is blowing up every corner of social media, you gotta look at the core of this case. A case that's had the hood locked in for more than 6 years.
The remix of Melly song, listen to that bitch. He said, bust a nigga head, something. We done jumped in front of him, it's already too late. We can't try to pull over and get back behind them.
Everything traces back to October 26, 2018, when two rising rappers, Anthony YNW Sack Chaser Williams and Christopher YNW Juvie Thomas Jr., were found passed inside a Jeep Cherokee at Memorial Hospital in Miramar. Now YNW Melly, real name Jamele Demons, wasn't some random dude floating around. He was one of their closest homies, part of the same YNW circle that had been grinding together in Florida, building a movement from scratch. These weren't rivals. These were supposed to be brothers, sticking together through pressure, struggle, and the come-up. The first story that surfaced claimed that Cortland YNW Bortland Henry drove the victims to the hospital after they were hit in a random drive-by. On the surface, it sounded tragic but simple, until everything started cracking open. What looked at first like just another painful story of young black men caught in street violence quickly twisted into something way darker.
Downstairs, I say, 80, see a Sack and Melly in the room. He already sleep in the Sack room. He had ran to the stairway because he heard me talking crazy, like, man, what the f going on? He looking lost, like, what's going on, bro? I say, man, go see a Sack in his room.
Like DeAndre told somebody. Everything Melly get, I get half.
Me do.
You hear that? He said he do. He just said Juvie and DeAndre, Sack Chaser, are YNW, and Sack Chaser's supposed to get half of everything.
At first, people thought it was the same tragedy our communities see way too often. But as investigators started peeling back the layers, the whole story collapsed faster than a weak roof in a hurricane. The forensic evidence came in loud and clear, and it did not match the original tale. Instead of bullets coming from outside the Jeep like a real drive-by, the autopsy showed both victims were shot from inside the vehicle. And it gets even crazier. The bullet paths lined up perfectly with the seat Melly was supposedly sitting in that night. Let me break this down because this is where the whole case goes off the rails. According to the prosecution, around 1 a.m. on October 26, 2018, 8 young men pulled up to New Era Recording Studio in Fort Lauderdale to work on music. Nothing strange about that. Studios stay packed with hungry artists grinding through the night trying to create something legendary.
Oh, she just took your clothes?
I mean, no, she got everybody clothes. Everybody clothes that was in there.
Why? My mind is telling me there's some, hiding of evidence type shit going on.
But according to the leaked footage, the vibe that night was twisted from the jump. Mills said everyone was acting off, not like their usual selves at all. Sack Chaser was moving extra aggressive, even slapping people for dozing off during the session. The energy was tense, messy, and straight up toxic. The session fell apart, nobody was locked in, and by 3:19 a.m., the crew decided to pack it up and head out. Now here's where the timeline gets serious. The group split into 2 rides. 4 hopped into a red Mitsubishi SUV, Trivian Glass, Don Tavia Withers, Jacoby Mills, and Adrian Davis. The other 4 loaded into a gray Jeep Cherokee, Cortland Henry behind the wheel, Anthony Williams in the front passenger seat, Christopher Thomas in the back, and Jamele YNW Melly Demon sitting in the rear driver's side seat. Surveillance cameras later caught both vehicles sticking to the same route, I-95 South, then sliding onto 595, crossing over to I-75 South, and rolling down toward Miramar Parkway. This is where things start tightening up real quick. At first, everything looked normal. Just 2 cars full of exhausted young dudes headed home after a long grind in the studio. But this is exactly where the story flips into something straight up sinister. At 184th Avenue, the red Mitsubishi kept rolling south and got picked up on surveillance entering the Sunset Lakes guard gate at 3:50 a.m., the gated spot where most of the crew stayed. But the gray Jeep, it never appeared on that same camera. Not once. Instead, later cell phone data exposed something way darker. The Jeep didn't go south at all. It went north, and that's where things turned chilling real fast. The Jeep headed up 184th, hit Pines Boulevard, then pushed west all the way toward the edge of the Everglades. A dark, empty stretch where no one would be around to see anything. No cars, no houses, no chance of witnesses, just silence. From there, the Jeep moved south on US 27, then took a left onto Pembroke Road, an end leading straight to a trash facility. According to the phone data, this isolated location is where the homicides allegedly happened at exactly 4:02 a.m. That's the moment everything changed. And here's the part that blows this whole case wide open. When cops searched the entire stretch of Miramar Parkway, where the so-called drive-by was supposed to have gone down, they found nothing. No shell casings, no broken glass, no bullet holes, no skid marks, not even a hint of a shootout. Zero evidence that a real drive-by ever happened there. Meanwhile, the medical examiner dropped a bomb of their own. When the fake drive-by was supposedly happening at 4:02 a.m., both victims were already gone. The extra gunshot wounds that came from outside the Jeep were post-mortem, meaning they happened after the victims were already passed from the shots fired inside the vehicle. Let that hit you for a second. The prosecution says Melly and Bortland didn't just take out their own boys. They allegedly pulled off a whole stage cover-up, riding around with their lifeless bodies and then shooting up the Jeep from outside to make it look like a random hit. That's ice-cold, calculated behavior that goes way beyond any street beef. This wasn't looking like some random fight or argument that spun out of control, and the prosecution made sure to push it even further. They brought out Instagram DMs where someone asked Melly about the passings, and he allegedly replied, "I did that. Shh." They also revealed that Melly was connected to the G-Shine blood set, and that just 2 days before the homicides, he was reportedly learning the gang's oath of loyalty. That added a whole new layer of tension to the case. The first trial collapsed into a mistrial in July 2023 because the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. Since then, the retrial has been delayed again and again, now pushed all the way to January 2027. Melly has been sitting in a cell for over 6 years with no conviction, and his co-defendant Bortland took a plea deal in October 2025 on accessory charges. And this leads straight to why the leaked interrogation tapes are shaking everything up. Jacoby Mills, also known as Jacoby Mill or Cortez Teasy Jacoby, is described as Bortland's blood cousin, and he was one of the dudes riding in the red car that night, meaning he was close enough to see how things unfolded, but distant enough to still be alive to explain what went down. These tapes were recorded in January 2019, just months after the homicides and long before any major case details hit the public. That timing is huge because Mills talked about information that wouldn't become public knowledge for years, giving his statements a level of credibility people can't ignore. But the fact that this footage is surfacing now, in November 2025, right when the retrial is heating up, has raised big questions. Is this leak designed to shift public perception? Is someone trying to sway potential jurors before the trial begins? Could it be connected to the civil suit still floating around? Or is this just discovery evidence spilling into the light at the worst possible moment? and the reaction from the hip-hop world has blown up like dynamite. Everybody from DJ academics to random people on Twitter is chiming in about what these revelations mean. The streets are split. Some folks are calling it the final piece proving Melly is guilty, while others are labeling Mills a snitch who's breaking the code to save himself. What makes this whole mess even more tangled is that Mills keeps denying he's a snitch all throughout the interrogation. He's sitting there claiming he's just trying to help his friends, but the details he drops are so sharp, so damaging, that it's hard to see how anything he's saying could help anybody except the prosecution. This man is spilling tea like it's the most explosive confession hip-hop has ever seen. We're back, and things are about to get real spicy in here. If you thought part 1 was wild, brace yourself, because we're diving deep into the gritty parts of what Jacoby Mills actually said in that interrogation room. And trust me, this footage hits harder than anything the industry's seen in years. Mills basically lays out the whole blueprint of what allegedly happened that night. And some of these details, they'll send a chill straight through your spine. He starts by giving a minute-by-minute rundown of the studio session, and from the jump you can hear that the vibe was completely off. He says they pulled up to New Era recording studio around midnight, but instead of that usual grind-heavy energy, everybody was tired, spaced out, and nodding off. And anybody from the hood knows studio time ain't cheap. You don't waste those hours unless something serious is weighing on the room. And here's where the story gets even crazier. Mills paints Sack Chaser as aggressive and controlling that night, slapping people for falling asleep during the session. If you know anything about how street circles operate when someone is disrespecting folks like that in front of everybody, that's usually the start of some real tension building up behind the scenes. Mills even describes Sack Chaser as unpredictable, someone with a history of violence. And that lines up with other talk floating around about long-standing friction in the group around money and control. Which leads us right into the rumor that's been floating through the streets for years, but never officially confirmed. The money beef that supposedly sparked the whole situation. According to the leaked audio and multiple sources, there were heavy disputes over a record deal worth several $100,000. Sack Chaser apparently believed he was the CEO of YNW and deserved half of whatever Melly earned. That kind of pressure, that kind of ego and entitlement sitting in the same room with people grinding for the spotlight, that's the kind of thing that can blow everything apart in one night. Now Mills starts breaking down the vehicle setup that night, and these details are crucial to understanding how everything unfolded. He confirms the seating inside the Jeep, Bortland driving, Sack Chaser up front, Melly sitting right behind Bortland, and Juvie behind Sack Chaser. Meanwhile, Mills was in the red car, with Tay behind the wheel, Fetty in the front passenger seat, and Adrian Davis in the back. But here's the part that hits with straight goosebumps. Mills says he tried to get into the Jeep at first, but said he felt like something stopped him, almost like divine intervention blocking him from climbing in. Whether you believe in a higher power or you chalk it up to raw street instinct, it sounds like Mills felt something dark was in the air around that group that night. He also mentions that Juvie grabbed weapons from the studio before they left, and that Melly was carrying a brown satchel that supposedly held a gun. That connects perfectly with the prosecution's angle that this wasn't some random argument, but something planned ahead of time. But now we get to the part that's absolutely wild. Mills says when they got back to the house in Sunset Lakes, they waited outside for about 30 minutes because nobody had keys. Eventually, most of the crew went inside and knocked out. But around 4 a.m., Mills gets a chilling phone call from his mother telling him someone called her saying, "Y'all all dead." Think about that for a second. His mother is getting late-night warnings that her son and his people are in danger. That's heavy street pressure. And when threats start hitting family members, you know the situation has crossed way past music business drama and into real danger. Then Mills explains that he saw multiple missed calls from Melly, and even mentions Melly calling Drew, their videographer, 17 times in the middle of the night. When someone is blowing up your phone like that at 4 a.m., something huge has gone down, no question. And that leads straight into the most damning part of Mills' entire testimony. The moment where everything he said shifts the whole case into an entirely different light. Mills says that after the unalivings, Melly jumped on FaceTime with him, and what he saw left him shaken. He claims Melly was pretending to cry, putting on this whole dramatic act but with zero real tears. just straight performance. And in the streets, being able to fake emotions after doing something violent is a whole different level. That's the kind of skill people associate with real hitters, not amateurs. If Mills's account is real, then we're talking about someone who could take out people he called his closest friends, then instantly flip into acting mode to hide it. That's intense, almost sociopathic behavior, and it paints a picture that's hard to ignore. Mills also drops details about Melly's appearance later at Fredo Bang's house. He says Melly had changed into a tank top and gym shorts, a switch up that definitely raises eyebrows, because a sudden clothes change like that could mean someone got rid of evidence. And here's the thing, other witnesses from the trial backed up this same clothing detail, which makes it even more suspicious. But hold up, the story gets even crazier. Mills explains that the next morning, the crew went searching in the nearby woods and actually found a blood-soaked .40 caliber handgun. Mills says he held the bloody gun in his hand before a manager snatched it away. He also mentions they were searching for a second weapon, described as a Tech, likely a Tech 9, but never found it. This is massive because prosecutors have said for years that they never recovered the unaliving weapons, even after combing through every possible location. Mills's account suggests the guns were found by the crew and quietly disposed of, which would explain why investigators kept coming up empty-handed. And through all of this, Mills makes it clear he doesn't believe Bortland was part of the actual violence. He paints Bortland as someone who isn't built for that type of cold-blooded action, someone who wasn't living that life. That lines up with why Bortland was able to take a plea deal for accessory charges instead of facing homicide counts himself. But Mills doesn't stop at breaking down the events. He keeps going, revealing even deeper layers to what allegedly unfolded that night. And then Mills starts breaking down why he thinks everything went down. And this is where the story jumps straight into controversy. He starts talking like the whole situation was a setup, even comparing it to other high-profile cases like King Von's homicide. But the part that really blows the room open is when he starts questioning how NBA YoungBoy supposedly knew so much about the incident. Mills even asks how NBA YoungBoy had insider-level details, pointing to old social media posts and an alleged remix where he claims YoungBoy hinted at what really happened. Now here's where we gotta pause, because deep searches haven't turned up any proof that this remix exists, and no federal investigation has ever linked NBA YoungBoy to these unalivings. But the fact that Mills brought his name into the conversation at all is wild, especially considering their crews had past altercations in the streets. Anyone who knows how hip-hop beef works knows things can escalate fast, and once crews start clashing, the consequences get serious real quick. Whether YoungBoy had anything to do with it or not, the fact Mills mentioned him shows just how deep and tangled hip-hop politics can get behind the scenes. What makes Mills' statements even more compelling is that he talked about all this back in 2019, long before the public knew certain details, and some of the things he said later turned out to be true. For example, Mills mentioned that Juvie's thumb had been shot off, and nobody outside law enforcement knew that until attorney John Phillips released the autopsy photos in 2025. Mills also described the exact location where Melly linked up with Fredo Bang, details that weren't confirmed until cell phone data surfaced during the trial. But throughout all of this, Mills keeps repeating that he's not snitching, that he's only trying to protect his friends. At one point during the interrogation, he even says he's scared his family might be harmed because he cooperated with police. That's the kind of fear you only see when street pressure gets real heavy. And the reaction to these leaks? Completely insane. Social media is on fire. Hip-hop voices like DJ Academics have gone frame by frame through the footage, while fans on Reddit and Twitter are fighting over whether Mills is a reliable witness or a dude trying to dodge trouble by throwing everyone else under the bus. What makes this whole situation even more interesting is how these revelations tie into the bigger picture of loyalty and betrayal. In hip-hop and in the streets, there's an unwritten code. You don't cooperate with law enforcement no matter what. But when your friends get taken out, and you start thinking another one of your own people might have done it, those lines blur real fast, and everyone starts moving different. Now in this final stretch, we're breaking down what all this means for Melly's upcoming trial, how it's shaken the wider hip-hop world, and what the fallout could look like for street culture in the music industry. Because trust me, this story is way bigger than just one homicide case. It's about loyalty, money, power, and the fatal consequences when all those forces collide in the worst possible way. The fallout is here, and it's changing everything for hip-hop. These leaked videos are spreading through the culture like wildfire, lighting up timelines and forcing people to rethink what loyalty really means. This ain't just about one courtroom battle. It's reshaping conversations about snitching, street rules, crew politics, and the business side of rap. Mills's revelations are hitting every layer of the game, the legal world, the industry, and the unwritten codes of the streets, all at the same time. First, let's talk legal consequences, because the timing of these leaks is way too perfect to be random. They're dropping right as Melly's retrial prep is heating up, and legal experts are already saying the footage likely won't be allowed in court due to authentication issues and hearsay. But here's the real problem. Millions of people have seen it already. That means finding 12 jurors who haven't been influenced just became a straight-up nightmare. How do you build an impartial jury when half the internet watched Mills lay out exactly what he thinks went down that night? That's a huge challenge for the defense. They're definitely going to push hard to suppress anything tied to these tapes, and they'll probably request a change of venue too, because trying to seat a fair jury after a viral moment like this is nearly impossible. But here's where it gets really interesting strategically. Some people think these leaks might be tied to the ongoing civil wrongful lawsuits. The victims' families are going after financial damages, and the rules about what evidence can be used in civil court are completely different from criminal trials. If that's true, these tapes might shift the balance in a major way. This case isn't just shaking one courtroom. It's shaking the whole culture, from the streets to the industry boardrooms. In civil court, the rules hit totally different. Hearsay is way more flexible, and the burden of proof is way lighter than in a criminal case. And now that Fredo Bang has been pulled into depositions for the civil suit, you can see just how wide this whole situation is spreading. Fredo wasn't even directly involved in what happened that night. But because Mills said Melly came to his house afterward, he's now getting dragged into the legal storm too. That shows how fast these cases can pull in people who were just standing nearby. Even major figures like 50 Cent have reacted to all this, proving that this case still has the entire hip-hop world glued to every update. Now let's step into the street politics side of this, because this is where things get seriously tangled. The leaked audio from Sack Chaser's family talking the day after the unalivings reveals deep inside knowledge about the tensions brewing inside the YNW circle. Family members were talking about financial drama, claiming Sack Chaser was trying to stop Melly from signing what they called a devil's deal. And this lines up with something people have whispered about in the streets for years, that the unalivings weren't about randomness or some last-minute argument, but about money and power. When record deals worth hundreds of thousands come into play, and one person thinks they deserve half while the other disagrees, those kinds of disputes can turn fatal real fast, especially when egos, status, and control are all mixed into the pot. The family audio even brings up suspicions about Melly's mother and her actions after the situation. There were claims about a storage unit being rented early the next morning to move belongings and possibly hide evidence. And the fact that Melly's mom reportedly called out of work at 5:30 a.m. that same morning suggests she knew something major had gone down before the public even had a clue. That's a detail that hits heavy and gets a lot of people raising eyebrows. Now, the NBA YoungBoy angle Mills mentioned is extra wild because it shows how deep these street connections run. Mills questioned how YoungBoy seemed to know so much about the situation, pointing to an alleged remix and old social media posts. Even though no remix has been found, the fact that their crews had past altercations explains why his name is even floating around this case. It shows how interconnected the hip-hop world really is. Beefs, alliances, street moves, and history all overlap. And when those connections go bad, the consequences can reach way farther than anyone expects. Now we gotta talk about the elephant stomping around the whole room. The snitching allegations aimed at Mills. All through that interrogation, Mills kept swearing he wasn't snitching, saying he was only trying to help his friends. But the hip-hop community has been relentless. Social media is roasting him, calling him out for cooperating with law enforcement, and the label is sticking to him like glue. No matter what his intentions were, this situation hits right at the heart of one of hip-hop's biggest cultural tensions. What do you do when the no-snitching code crashes into the reality of wanting justice for your ended homies? Mills was stuck in a no-win situation. If he stayed silent, the people responsible might walk free. But if he talked, he gets branded a snitch and instantly becomes a target. That's a dangerous crossroads. And anyone from the streets knows exactly how real that pressure gets. And the fact that Mills said straight up he feared his family might get harmed for cooperating shows how serious these dynamics are. Snitching isn't just about courtrooms. It's about survival, street image, and the rules that people grow up around. From a bigger cultural lens, this case shines a harsh spotlight on the music game and street life. The money disputes that supposedly push things toward violence are part of a larger pattern. Huge checks, sudden fame, and pressure tearing friendships apart. When everyone's grinding together and suddenly a six-figure deal is on the table, that's when loyalty gets tested for real. And not everybody passes that test. Critics say cases like this show how young black artists end up under a microscope with law enforcement watching their every move. Others say the forensic evidence in this situation is too strong to ignore, and that the justice system is simply doing what it's supposed to. And Melly sitting in custody for over 6 years without a conviction raises major questions about due process. While supporters of the prosecution argue that the charges are so serious, the long timeline is justified. Looking ahead to the retrial in January 2027, one thing is clear. These leaked videos change the entire playing field. Florida is still pushing for the death penalty, and experts say there's basically zero chance Melly gets a plea deal that doesn't include life behind bars. With Bortland already taking a plea and possibly ready to testify, plus Mills's detailed statements flooding the internet, Melly's defense team is under enormous pressure right now. This next trial is going to be one of the most watched courtroom battles hip-hop has ever seen. But beyond all the legal fireworks, these revelations remind us of the human cost behind what allegedly went down that night. Mills's description of Juvie as someone who wanted out of the rap chaos and the complicated relationships inside the group paints a heartbreaking picture of young men whose lives were cut short, allegedly by someone they trusted. That hits heavy every single time. And the viral spread of these leaks raises some real questions about today's social media world. Should interrogation footage be treated like entertainment? How do we balance the public's hunger for information with the defendant's right to a fair trial? These debates go way beyond this one case, and they're only getting louder. As we all wait for the retrial, one thing is guaranteed. These leaked videos lock the YNW Melly case in as one of the most closely watched legal battles hip-hop has ever seen. The truth of what happened on October 26, 2018 might be way more layered than anyone first imagined. But Mills's detailed account gives the most complete insider look the public has ever gotten into those tragic hours. Whether this footage ends up helping convict Melly, exposing deeper twists we haven't heard yet, or getting tossed out of court entirely, that part's still up in the air. But what's already crystal clear is that this case has exposed major tensions inside hip-hop. Loyalty, money, violence, and the struggle for justice. These issues stretch way beyond any single person's fate, and the whole culture is trying to process it. The streets are watching, the courts are gearing up, and everybody is waiting to see what comes next. This story is nowhere near finished, and the aftershocks from these leaks are going to be felt long after the final verdict drops. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video, and I'll see you on the next one.